seats. Good morning, it's so good to see you. My name's Brigid, I'm part of the team here. And I have a question for you this morning, which might make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. I wonder where your cut-off line for lying is. What is your cut-off line for telling a lie? How do you feel about texting somebody, yeah, I'm on my way, when you haven't left home yet? I think I've done that probably within the last 3 days. I wonder whether you are comfortable telling someone that actually you're about half an inch taller than you are. If you ask me how tall I am, I'll tell you that I'm 5'4". If you ask my doctor how tall I am, I'm 5'3" and nearly 4, but not quite. I wonder if you have ever told your boss that you're ill when actually you're not. My boss is in the room, so there's absolutely no comment on that. A recent academic journal found that on average, human beings lie 1 or 2 times a day. I thought the same, Liberty. Is that all? Maybe we all hit above the average here. And on the job front, I was looking at CVs, and the recruitment website, Indeed.com, they reckon that 40% of people lie on their CV. 40%, that is a lot. And apparently 3/4 of employers have caught someone out in a CV lie. Now, that might be things like inflating job titles or embellishing revenue that you've made a little bit. I think a particularly dangerous one, which apparently people do, is say that they can speak a language fluently when they can't, which is bold if you ask me, but there we go. We often manage to convince ourselves, don't we, that a little white lie is harmless. But we have reached word 9 in our series, looking at our 10 words, and this word has something to say about those little white lies. So please stand with me. We are going to read this verse, number 9 of the 10 words. From Exodus chapter 20. It says, "You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor." This is the word of the Lord. Do take a seat. So, as we looked at the beginning of this series, these 10 words in Exodus, they are all about loving God and loving our neighbor. And this is another one of those words about how we love our neighbors well. Now, we've often understood this line, do not bear false witness against your neighbor, about lying, and that is included, but there's more to it than that. There's more to bearing false witness than just lying. Initially, this phrase comes about in the legal sense, in terms of standing up in a court. It's that moment when a witness is called forward to testify about someone else, and it's that cliche of telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Because in a court circumstance with truth, then justice can happen. But without truth, things start to get a little bit messy. The Hebrew word here that we translate as bear, it means to answer or to respond. So at its purest, this instruction is don't answer wrongly about your neighbor. But it points to something much bigger than that as well. This is about what we do with our words, what we do with our speech. And God has a lot to say about that throughout the Bible. The first half of the Bible in the Old Testament is full of instruction and wisdom about the way that we use our tongues. Proverbs, particularly, a book that is packed full of wisdom, has loads to say on our words. Proverbs 10:19, sin is not ended by multiplying words, but the prudent hold their tongues. Chapter 15, verse 4, the soothing tongue is a tree of life, but a perverse tongue crushes the spirit. Another one, the heart of the righteous weighs its answer, but the mouth of the wicked gushes evil. And chapter 23, verse 23, those who guard their mouths and their tongues keep themselves from calamity. Pretty clear, right? And then the New Testament, the second half of the Bible, is no different. If anything, the instructions there about our tongue, our words, are even clearer. Peter, who was one of Jesus' closest friends, quotes the Psalm saying, "Whoever would love life and see good days must keep their tongue from evil and their lips from deceitful speech." He instructs us to follow in Jesus' way with no deceit found in our mouths. James is perhaps the clearest of all in what he says about the human tongue. He says this in chapter 3 of his letter. "Consider ships, though very large and driven by fierce winds, they are guided by a very small rudder, wherever the will of the pilot directs. So too, though the tongue is a small part of the body, it boasts great things. Consider how a small fire sets ablaze a large forest, and the tongue is a fire. A tongue, a world of unrighteousness, is placed among our members. It stains the whole body, sets the course of life on fire, and is set on fire by hell. With the tongue we bless the Lord and Father, and with it we curse people who are made in God's likeness, blessing and cursing from the same mouth. And then the final bit I'm going to read to you is Jesus' words himself. Jesus is speaking about what defiles a person, what spoils them or removes purity from them. He says this: "Do you not see that whatever goes into the mouth passes into the stomach and is expelled? But what comes out of the mouth proceeds from the heart, and this defiles a person. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false witness, slander. These are what defile a person. But to eat with unwashed hand does not defile anyone." You'll recognize, if you've been around for this series, some of those other words mentioned in that passage that Jesus says. This is really important. It really matters. Jesus talks about it on more than one occasion. And in the 21st century, we've got really good at thinking about what comes out of our mouths for others to see. Our lives are curated and mediated through the lens of what we want to tell other people. And what we hear as well from media and from others is also being really carefully curated. The world around us is not neutral. It doesn't just give us the cold, hard facts. We live in a story-based culture, and not all of those stories are true or helpful. Our news channels, the place where we're supposed to learn what's really going on, the truth in our world, so often have whirlpools of rumor and false accusations associated with them. Research from 2022 found that 80% of people come across fake news in their day-to-day lives. And 52% of people admit they've believed fake news at least once. I'm not going to make you put your hand up and tell me if you believe something. Statista published data last month on fake news from across the world and found that in the UK, only 33% of adults trust news media outlets most of the time. And between a quarter and a third of adults have seen fake news in a week's span about COVID, politics, climate change, and the war in Ukraine. So many aspects of our culture are not based on complete truth anymore. And that, in theory, is from the reputable sources. No wonder the younger generations that we're talking about wanting to reach and give them the good news about Jesus are so desperate to see authenticity in their leaders. Social media, advertising, marketing, they all tell the story of what it is to live the good life, and we join in. Now, I'm not saying that these things are inherently bad at all. But I am saying that they convince us to engage in rumor and scandal and exaggeration so that we feel like our story is worth telling. We feel like the only way that our stories are worth contributing to the wider world is if they can match up to the scandal and the extravagance. We exaggerate the stupidity of the people that we disagree with to make our point. Or perhaps we over-exaggerate the things that we think are good. I am not good with football at all. I understand almost nothing. But I grew up near Sunderland, and so I'm Sunderland till I die, but I know nothing useful. If you talk to me about it, I will over-exaggerate how fantastic Sunderland are, based on absolutely nothing. It's shocking. But we do it, don't we? We over-exaggerate what we think is great just to prove our point. And perhaps in the moment, this feels harmless. But the reality is, of course, it has an impact. From the tiniest white lie to slander and gossip or blatant lying, it matters. Our words matter to God. They matter because they tell us what's going on inside us. So this word, do not bear false witness against your neighbor. It's about answering the truth. In our workplaces, in our friendships, our families, at home, as we study, wherever we are. And I think that there are two ways that this plays out practically for us. And I wonder which one you're going to resonate with more. I think as Christians, we have to think and reflect and ask for God's help really seriously with these. And I've definitely found myself on both sides of these camps. So the first one, the way it affects us, is we can be too nice. And the second way that I think this affects us is that we can be fake nice. So either we're too nice or we're fake nice. So, too nice. In my first proper job out of university, as far as I knew, I was the only Christian in my office. And I remember chatting to a colleague on our lunch break a few weeks into the role and telling her that I was a Christian. And I so vividly remember her responding, "Oh, that's why you're so nice." I was like, oh. We were always banned from using nice in my English lessons at school. I don't know if anyone else was, because it's so bland. There's nowhere in the Bible that we are called to be nice. Kind, yes. Loving, yes. But bland, definitely not. Not bearing false witness, it calls us to speak truth with love into the situations that God has placed us. Speaking truth can be an extraordinary expression of love. You might know the story of David and Nathan in the Bible. David was the king of Israel. He had huge amounts of power and authority, and Nathan was his trusted advisor. In one of the books that describes David's life, we join the story where David has committed adultery and murder. That's two of the words in one fell swoop. And Nathan confronts David about his appalling actions. Nathan embodies that phrase, speaking truth to power. Now, David could have responded by chopping off Nathan's head or something. But because of the friendship and the trust that they shared, David is humbled, realizes what he's done, and repents, apologizes to God. In Nathan here, we see that speaking truth is an extraordinary expression of love. And you see, if we just love others by speaking truth, is it love at all? I would go as far to say that love without truth can actually be hypocritical. It's just being too nice. If we aren't able to name the problems that we see in the situations around us, but because we're trying to be nice, good Christians, actually it prohibits us from being able to pose the solutions. If you see a situation around you in your workplace, something that a friend is going through, something in our culture or our community that is unjust, where those who are vulnerable are being mistreated, where the marginalized are being further marginalized, we have to say something. We have to speak truth. Where there are people who are not able to speak for themselves, we can't just be nice. We have to speak truth. With God's wisdom and God's love, as Christians, we are called to bring truth to those situations. And sometimes that creates conflict. I don't know if any of you are like me, maybe you're much better than I am, but I will avoid conflict at all costs. I find it really scary and really difficult. But I was encouraged by this story in the Bible as I thought about it earlier. You might have heard of Zacchaeus. He is described in the Bible as a small man, and he was hated and fraudulent in the way that he collected taxes as his job. But he was a little bit intrigued about Jesus. So he waited up a tree because he was small, so he needed the view, as Jesus was passing by. And long story short, he ends up going to have Jesus around for dinner. And people around him start to grumble. People who love Jesus are going, hang on, why is he hanging out with this person? In their eyes, Jesus was talking to the wrong person. But Jesus speaks truth to the power in that crowd of people who are grumbling. He says, today salvation has come to this house because this man is the son of Abraham. The Son of Man, speaking about himself, has come to seek and save the lost. When Jesus speaks truth, everybody wins. The vulnerable are lifted up. Those who are living in ways that harm others are given a chance to turn around and see again. Because the beautiful thing about following Jesus is that he is the Prince of Peace. If speaking truth requires us to cause conflict, Jesus himself is the peace that can restore. Speaking truth with love can bring justice and peace. And I'm saying this to myself as much as anyone. But this is also about being wise with our truth. This is where the second way that this word plays out comes in. The word instructs us to avoid answering falsely about our neighbor, about anybody made in the image of God. And that includes what's said behind someone's back. We've talked about murdering and stealing over the last few weeks. But the reality is, I'm not imagining that most of us are going out on a Sunday afternoon to murder or steal. But the way that we hurt people usually is with our words. We harm with our speech. A little bit further on in the book of Exodus, it expands on this word a bit. It instructs God's people not to spread false reports about each other or follow the crowd in wrongdoing. I wonder what this might sound like in 2023. Oh my gosh, have you heard what Darren said in that meeting? Actually, I probably shouldn't tell you this about Jordan, but let me just tell you anyway. Or it would be really good if we could pray for Dylan, because I don't know if you've heard what's going on with him, but he's got caught up in some weird stuff. All of that is purely hypothetical. But we can't talk like this. We can't talk about our neighbors like this. Jesus is really clear about who our neighbor is. It's everyone. Everyone is our neighbor. Everyone who is made in the image of God. I'm sure all of us have a story of being affected by gossip in some way. We know how it feels to hear something about yourself that no one else intended you to hear. I went to an all-girls secondary school. I know what it is to gossip. I've seen the results of both sides, those who are gossiped about and those who gossip. I've engaged in both sides myself. On the whole, nobody is happy. So we've seen that love without truth is hypocrisy, but truth without love, when we just speak truth with no thought of love behind it, it is brutal. It's brutal when we speak truth without remembering that the people that we're talking about are made in God's image. Someone who needs the dignity and the care that is afforded with that. Where does it all lead us? What happens when truth isn't spoken in unjust situations? Or when gossip and slander are spread about those made in the image of God? It's harmful, right? It destroys trust. It ruins relationships. It breaks down relationships, our reputation as trustworthy people. But truth with love, the Bible tells us that brings freedom. I don't think any of us set out to lie or to speak wrongly or badly of others, and yet we do it. Why do we do it? I have a few ideas, and I wonder if any of these will click with you. I think we speak falsely of others because we want to impress them, because we want to protect ourselves, because we want to gain advantage, sometimes even because we want to harm other people. But anything that we speak falsely about others, it starts from a place of believing something false about ourselves or about God. Just like Jesus said in that passage, what comes out of our mouths flows from within our hearts. Perhaps we believe that we need to exaggerate or underplay in order to impress other people because we don't feel that we're worth enough. Perhaps we think that we need to lie to protect ourselves because we worry that God might not protect us or that God's protection isn't enough. Perhaps we believe that we need to embellish our CVs a little bit because we can't succeed otherwise. Maybe we don't have a sense of what success with God looks like. Perhaps we want to harm others, their reputation or their confidence, because we don't have much confidence in ourselves. Confidence that we are known and loved and held by God. We need to know the truth about who God is. And we need to know the truth about who God says we are, because what comes out of our mouths proceeds from our hearts. So what does this look like practically for us, maybe tomorrow morning as you head into work or with your family? This is not just about spouting truth wherever you go. Truth and love find their balance together. Honesty and intensity are not fruits of the Spirit, but kindness and generosity are. So when you come to say something to someone else, I want you to ask yourself these 3 questions tomorrow until it becomes like a habit. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? And if you find that you're embellishing things a lot, you find that you're really tempted to gossip or spread rumors about someone behind their back, I want you to ask yourself, what is going on in my heart? What am I believing about myself or about God that means that this is what's coming out of my mouth? Because I'm pretty sure there'll be something going on deeper in you than just what is coming out. We are going to get this wrong. We're humans. We muddle up that tension between truth and love all the time. We tip one way and then tip the other. So when we do, we look to the truest witness, the one who always got the balance right between truth and love, the one who never bore false witness right up until his death. Jesus spoke the truth about his life and his purpose. He spoke well of others, even when they were literally witnessing wrongly against him on trial and death. Jesus chose not to gossip and rumors spread about those who hated him. Instead, he loved them even behind their backs. Why would Jesus do this? Well, because it changes the world. Imagine the impacts that it would have if every single Christian never told a lie, always shut down gossip, never spread a rumor. And what about us? What about you and me? How does Jesus speak about us? those who love him and follow him. The Bible tells us that Jesus is interceding, is speaking out on our behalf to our Father in heaven right now. At this moment, Jesus is speaking to God about you. And what is he saying? He's saying that you're loved. He's saying that you have worth. He's saying you're accepted, that you are being transformed more and more into Jesus' likeness. This is how Jesus speaks about us. So let that be how we speak about others. Jesus called the early church to testify as witnesses about him. And we are called to do exactly the same thing with our lives and especially with our words. We are called to testify to the fact that we are loved and our neighbors are loved by God. Now, living in truth is definitely not going to make our lives easier. But it will make us look back and think, that is exactly how I wanted to live. At the end of the day, I think this is about how we want our society to be ruled. Because we can have that impact. You may just be one person here, but as a church family, as Christians across the world, as we go out from here into our day-to-day lives, we impact the society that we live in. Do we want a society that is controlled by power grabbing, by reputation protecting, by wealth grabbing? Or do we want a society that is ruled by truth and by justice and mercy and love? I'd love to invite you to stand with me. I'm going to pray for us.